Hello everyone and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker, and today I'm going to talk about Will, Scion of Peace, and the commander deck that I built around him. Will is a very cool commander that reads, Will, Scion of Peace, 1 white blue, legendary creature human wizard with vigilance. Tap. Spells you cast this turn that are white and or blue cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Will is a super cool commander that mirrors his sister Rowan, Scion of War, and if you'd like to check out that commander deck tech, I did that last week and you can view it on my channel, and I'll put it in the cards and in the description below. But Will focuses on you gaining life, which if you're facing Rowan is actually probably stronger, because then it's going to be harder for her to kill you. In addition to that, you just get stronger as the game goes on and can cast your spells, where Rowan is more of a combo early game finisher. So she can definitely be strong, but he is no slouch himself. So let's dive right into the lands and see what I included in this deck. Nothing too over the top, but we have Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Otawara Soaring City. Those are some of just the basic lands we have in the deck. We also have Glacial Fortress, Port Town, Prairie Stream, Sea of Clouds, Sky Cloud, Expanse, and Temple of Enlightenment for those lands. Tap for both a white and a blue. And lastly, we have Radiant Fountain and Reliquary Tower. Reliquary Tower is actually going to be pretty important in this deck because we're going to be drawing a lot of cards, so having no max hand size is really good. And in addition to that, Radiant Fountain gains us some life, and that's a card type I want to bring up, is there's a whole bunch of lands from a bunch of different sets that gain you 1 or 2 life whenever they enter, and I didn't really want to build around that, so if that's something you think would be good to have in this deck, please put them in yourself, but that was something that I didn't do. Now, moving on to early game acceleration, obviously we want to get to turn 3 and cast Will, turn 4 activate him, or hopefully faster. So we have Arcane Signet, Commander Sphere, Pristine Talisman, Soul Ring, and Thought Vessel. All of these are going to help us ramp early, and once we have a Will on the battlefield, I added a couple cards here to help us get him going. So first off, we have Chaplain's Blessing, Light of Hope, Rest for the Weary, and Revitalize. All these cards gain you just a little bit of life for a little bit of mana that is hopefully going to help accelerate you and be able to cast some of your big spells very, very quickly. In addition to doing that, we're going to move into our next category that I thought would be fun to call We Will Gain Life. So starting off, we have Angel of Vitality, Archangel of Thune, and Archivist of Ogma. Archangel of Vitality is going to help us gain just a little bit more life, and she gets buffed as long as we have a certain amount of life. Archangel of Thune is going to buff everything when we gain life, which we're going to do a lot in this deck, so it's going to be very helpful to build up our big board. And in addition, she has lifelink. Archivist of Ogma is an early creature we can use to gain some life and draw some cards. Next up is Authority of the Council, Beacon of Immortality, and Boon Reflection. Authority of the Council is one of my favorite monocolor enchantments because you can gain so much life off of it. It works just like the Soul Wardens. Whenever a creature an opponent controls enters, you gain a life. Well, Soul Wardens also gain you life when your creatures enter, but it also taps those creatures. So if your opponent is playing a hasty deck, you can just basically shut this down, which is super great. Beacon of Immortality just doubles your life total. That's it. It's real simple. It's really powerful. If you got 50 life, now you got 100. And Boon Reflection, if you would gain life, gain twice that much life instead. This is going to be one of the essential enchantments in this deck, just doubling our life gain, making it so, yeah, we gain 4 life, tap Will, everything is 4 life cheaper. Moving on, we have Celestine the Living Saint, Cleric class, and Daxos Blessed by the Sun. Celestine the Living Saint is one of my favorite Warhammer cards, and it's so great because at the beginning of your end step, we can return a target creature with mana value X or less from our graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn. We'll be gaining a ton of life, so you can basically return whatever you want. If you even have a lot of cards in hand and you don't have any infinite hand size, you can just pitch maybe some big stuff and get it back with Celestine. Cleric class is going to help us gain additional life whenever we gain life. We're going to put counters on stuff when we gain life, and we get to return something from our graveyard to the battlefield, which is super great at level 3. And Daxos Blessed by the Sun has whenever another creature enters the battlefield or dies, we gain 1 life. We don't have a lot of token synergy in this deck, but just the entering and dying of our opponent's stuff, including our stuff, is just going to be so great and just put us so far ahead. Next up is Drogskull Reaver, Faithful Mending, and Gold Forger Thopterex. Drogskull Reaver has Flying, Double Strike, and Lifelink, and whenever you gain life, you will draw a card. This is one of those cards that once we get this out there, we're just going to be able to basically draw our entire deck. Faithful Mending gains us 2 life. We draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, and it also has a flashback. So a little bit of life gain here. We get to dig through some of our cards and put that towards Will's ability. And Gold Forged Thopteryx is great because it has flying, lifelink, and gives our legendary permanents Ward 2, which is kind of weird. I don't know why this uncommon gives our legendary permanents Ward 2, but it's going to protect our commander and a lot of our other creatures in this deck. So, I mean, that's pretty good. I'll take it. Heliod the Suncrowned, Quain, Irritant Meddler, and Rock's Faithmender are next. Heliod the Suncrowned is one of those cards that go infinite, and I didn't include Walking Ballista in this deck because that's just such a popular combo. If you want to add it in, throw it in here. But whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 on a creature you control, which is super, super great for us. And we can give something lifelink, which is great. Quain, Irritant Meddler, taps, and each player will draw a card, and then each player who drew a card this way, it's just a fun little group hug card that I like including in a lot of Azorius decks. You don't have to be mean all the time. And Rock's Faithmender has lifelink and doubles the amount of life we gain. This is another staple card in this deck that's just gonna make it so we gain life twice as fast. Next we have Serra Ascendant, Shabbaraz, the Sky Shark, and Soul Warden. Serra Ascendant is such a great card. For 1 mana, we get a creature with lifelink, and as long as we have 30 more life, which if we play this on turn 1, we surely will, it gets +5/+5 and has flying. This is a super, super early way to gain us a ton of life very, very quickly and would be great for Will. Shabbaraz, the Sky Shark, has whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you gain 1 life. We're going to get into a lot of ways to draw a lot of cards, so this is excellent. And Soul Warden is one of my favorite cards because whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. Now, we're responsible on our turn, but if we have some instants in our hand, if our opponent plays, I don't know, 10 creatures, let's say, we get 10 life and we can tap Will and cast those instants. So, pretty good card. Next up, we have Soul's Attendant, Suture Priest, and the Gaffer. And Soul's Attendant just works identically to Soul Warden, where we gain 1 life whenever a creature enters the battlefield. Suture Priest is one of my all-time favorite cards because whenever another creature enters under an opponent's control, they lose a life, but under our control, we gain a life. And those are May abilities, so we don't have to make our opponents lose life, but if they're playing a token deck, this might be key to keep them from popping off. And the Gaffer is a really, really cool card from the Lord of the Rings Commander decks that says at the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, draw a card. Soul Warden and Soul's Attendant are perfect cards for this little guy because if your opponents are playing 2-3 creatures a turn, you're going to have enough life to draw a card every end step, which makes this card very, very powerful. And lastly, we have 1000-Year Elixir and Valkyrie Harbinger. 1000-Year Elixir makes it so we can activate Will the turn he comes down, and also we can pay 1 to untap him to tap him again to get double the price off of some of our cards. This is probably the best artifact in this deck, but there are some other ones that are actually really, really powerful. And Valkyrie Harbinger says at the beginning of each end step, if you gain 4 more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. There's a whole set of cards like this that make angels whenever you gain a certain amount of life. And if that's something you're interested in adding, you know, you can swap out a couple of cards here, but I just wanted to throw this in to let you know that this strategy is pretty feasible, especially in a deck like this. So now let's go through, well, how do you win in this deck? And I call this We Will Win Con, after Will, of course. But this is going to be a selection of cards that are basically how we're going to win. So starting off, we have Aetherflux Reservoir, Angel of Destiny, and Blue Sun Zenith. Aetherflux Reservoir is a staple card in any life gain deck because we're going to be gaining a ton of life. We can basically just laser beam people for 50 damage and knock them out of the game at instant speed. Angel of Destiny is one of my favorite win con cards because you don't necessarily have to win, but you can just gain a ton of life with it. Whenever a creature controlled deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each gain that much life, meaning that we actually can't kill our players when we're attacking with our creatures with this on the battlefield. But at the beginning of your end step, if you have at least 15 or more life than your starting life total, each player Angel of Destiny attack this turn loses the game. So this is a very, very easy way for us to kill our opponent. If we can hit them with this and we have 15 or more life, which we probably will be gaining if we can hit them with this to begin with, then we're probably going to win. And Blue Sun Zenith just basically can draw out our entire library, and that's because I also have Thassa's Oracle in this deck. You're going to see a couple more of these because drawing out your library is pretty easy when you gain, I don't know, 30 life, and you can cast one of these spells and draw a bunch of cards and, you know, do that a couple of turns, you're going to win. But Thassa's Oracle is sort of one of those essential win con cards. You know, if you don't want to play it, you don't have to, but if I was building this competitively against Rowan, I would, because Rowan's going to kick your butt if you don't have Thassa's Oracle in here. Next up, we have Drown in Dreams, Felidar Sovereign in Finale of Glory. Drown in Dreams is a cool card that lets you draw X cards or or mill a target player for twice X cards. So if we gain a ton of life on one turn, we can just mill our opponent out and draw us a bunch of cards in the process. And next up, Philadar Sovereign is probably one of the most interesting win con cards. It was definitely a card made before Commander was a popular format, because at the beginning of upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. If you somehow were able to play this on turn 1, by the time you get to turn 2, you just win, which is cool. But in a deck like this, it's going to pose a serious threat. Your opponents either have to deal with it or you win. So as long as you can keep your life total up, this is a great win con. And Finale of Glory is a really, really cool card that we're going to be able to take great advantage of, because we create X 2/2 White Soldier creature tokens with Vigilance if X is 10 or more. We also create X 4/4 White Angel creature tokens with Flying and Vigilance. There is a couple of ways we can make a ton of tokens in this deck, and this is one of them. This will provide us with a big board that we can basically just win, and our opponents can't really do much about it. Even if we just cast this for 10, we have 10 2/2s and 10 4/4s. That's enough to definitely knock out an opponent. So yeah, this is a great card. Next up, we have Finale of Relevation, Heliod's Intervention, and Moonshaker Cavalry. Finale of Relevation says draw X cards, and if X is 10 or more, instead shuffle your graveyard into your library, then draw X cards, untap up to 5 lands, and you have no max hand size for the rest of the game. Most likely, we're going to be casting this for more than 10, getting us, basically all of our win con cards, maybe drawing out. So this is a very great card to have in the deck. Heliod's Intervention can gain us twice X life, where if we gained, I don't know, let's say 30 life on a turn, we can pay 30 into this and gain 60 after that, so a total of 90 for the turn. That seems pretty good to me. Conversely, you can use this as a, board wipe to destroy all the artifacts and enchantments that you don't want on the board, so that's also very good. And Moonshaker Cavalry is a new card from the Wild of Eldraine that is super great. It's basically a white Craterhoof Behemoth. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain flying and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. If you're able to play stuff like Finale of Glory and then play this, you're just unstoppable at that point. Nobody's going to be able to beat you. Next up, we have Pull from Tomorrow, Sphinx's Revelation, and Stormherd. Pull from Tomorrow is just another draw spell, be able to draw out our deck, similarly to Sphinx's Revelation, but in the process, we're also going to be able to gain a ton of life. And Stormherd is probably one of the coolest cards that Will is going to be able to discount the most, because this 10 mana card creates X 1/1 White Pegasus creature tokens with Flying, where X is your life total. This is one of those cards that if we can do this early, we can basically secure the victory right then and there. So I really love this card. I think it's really unique, and yeah, I'd love to be able to cast this. And finally, we have Thassa's Oracle, Time Stretch, and White Sun's Twilight. Thassa Oracle is a win con card. If you don't know how it works, it counts the number of devotion you have on the board, and you scry that many cards. If the number of cards you're scrying is greater than the number of cards in your library, you just win the game. This is such a big win con card in a lot of decks. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's very powerful, and that's how we're going to win with most of these strategies. Drawing out your deck is playing this card next. Time Stretch is one I included in here because I just wanted everybody to realize that you can put a ton of extra turn spells in and just basically take infinite turns. Like, this is a Time Walk, where for 2 blue, you just take an extra turn. This one, you take 2 extra turns, so I guess it's 2 Time Walks for as little as only 2 blue mana, which is super great. And White Sun's Twilight is actually a really neat one I thought I would include, because you're going to gain X life. If X is 5 or more, we destroy all other creatures, and then we create X 1/1 colorless Fire and Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1. If we put 30 into X, destroy the board. If our opponents can't play anything on their next turn, we can just infect them out, which I thought was a really neat way to win with this deck, because that's probably not how you're going to do most of it, so I really like this add-in. And the last couple cards in this deck, I'm going to call good stuff. These are all cards that are going to help balance out the deck. Maybe there's some removal, maybe there's some additional card draw, bounce spells, all that sort of stuff that really didn't fit in the other parts of this deck, but are just going to help round it out. So starting off with that, we have Ajani, Strength of the Pride, Alhamrit's Archive, and Cyconic Rift. Ajani's Strength of the Pride is really, we just don't care about anything other than his tick down, because essentially we're going to have a ton of life the entire game. As soon as we cast him, we have 15 or more life than our starting life total. We can exile it, and it will exile each artifact and creature your opponents control, letting you basically take over the board and swing in, maybe kill an opponent or two. So this is a really great card. In addition to that, you can make some cats, you can gain some life, but yeah, that 0 ability is probably where you're just going to cast this for a giant board wipe that's going to be one-sided. Alhamrit's Archive is a great card because we gain twice as much life if we would gain life, and we draw twice as many cards if we would draw some cards. This is going to help us in our win con situation. This is going to gain us double the life to cast our spells for double, and then we're going to draw double the amount of cards, being able to do Thassa's Oracle with a lot less mana than we would have otherwise. But it is 5 mana, so it's a large investment, especially because we do not get a discount on casting these colorless spells. And then we have Psychonic Rift, which everybody knows what this does. It returns target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, and you can overload it to return every non-land permanent to each player's hand, except us. Next up, we have Dovin's Veto, Esper Sentinel, and Fumigate. Dovin's Veto is just probably one of the best counter spells, just ability-wise, maybe not mana cost-wise, because it can't be countered, and we counter target spell, so that seems pretty good to me. Esper Sentinel is going to help us draw some cards, and Fumigate is going to help us in a tough situation where we destroy all creatures. We gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to activate Will when we do this, unless we have something like 1,000-Year Elixir out, and then we cast Will again. But it's a pretty good way to gain us a ton of life and also destroy the board. Generous Gift, Lightning Greaves, and Mystical Tutor are next. Generous Gift is just a great removal spell that can destroy a target permanent. Lightning Greaves gives our commander haste and shroud, or maybe one of our other creatures we want to protect. And Mystical Tutor can search for an instant or sorcery card and put that card on top of our library. That way, if we need a win con, we can just go search it up. Path to Exile, Rhystic Study, and Smothering Tide are next. Path to Exile is a great exile card that's just going to have our opponents gain a basic land tapped on the battlefield for maybe their best creature. Rhystic Study says whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless they pay 1. Yeah, if they don't pay 1, you get to draw a card. This can happen multiple times a turn in case your opponent just wants to, cast a bunch of stuff and doesn't want to pay. So this can gain you a lot of cards and get you good advantage early on. And Smothering Tithe says whenever an opponent draws a card, that player pays 2, and if they can't, you create a treasure token. Some of these spells that we're casting, especially these like win con spells, says target player draws that many cards. So we can force our opponent to draw a bunch of cards and just make us a ton of treasure tokens. Maybe we don't care if they have all the cards in their deck and we just want 100 treasure tokens. That is definitely going to help us win regardless, so I don't know, I like that idea. Next up is Stroke of Midnight, Swiftfoot Boots, and Swords to Plowshares. Stroke of Midnight is a new uncommon removal spell from the Wilds of Eldraine that I really, really love because it's a destroy target non-land permanent and its controller makes a 1/1 human. It's a little high costed for some of the removal spells, but in white to destroy a target permanent seems pretty viable to me. Swiftfoot Boots, just like Lightning Greaves, it's going to give our commander hexproof and haste. And Swords of Plowshares makes it so we can exile a target creature and its controller gains that much life. And in a pinch, we can use this ourselves to basically gain a ton of life and activate Will with it. And our last 2 cards in this deck are Venser's Journal and Well of Lost Dreams. Venser's Journal says we have no max hand size, and at the beginning of our upkeep, you gain 1 life for each card in your hand. All those cards that say we have no max hand size is going to be super great because if we draw 30 cards, well, we gain 30 life at the beginning of our upkeep. And that's just going to help start off Will with an unimaginable lead on everything else. And Will of Lost Dreams might not be the best card in this deck, but whenever you gain X life, you can pay X to draw that many cards, which is actually probably pretty decent. Unfortunately, Will doesn't discount that any, so, we have all these other effects, and, we can just use that to draw out cards if we don't have any draw spells in our hands. Maybe we'll draw into one. And that is it, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I know this was not as powerful as my Rowan Commander deck, but I hope you enjoyed this anyways, and, leave me a suggestion. What do you think would be a great card to add in here? Was there any win cons I missed? Was there any great creatures or enchantments or anything that would really help buff up this deck? I would really like to hear what you have to say down in the comments down below. In addition to that, it's really going to help me. I will try and communicate with you and, see what you got to say. I genuinely like to hear your suggestions, and I really appreciate them. Thank you. In addition to that, if you aren't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. Yeah, just become part of my team here, and I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers. And if this is your first video you're watching for me, or the 10th, and you aren't subscribed yet, please consider. I do some really nice work, and I try to put out, at least 1 Commander deck tech a week, so I would really appreciate it. And if you want to help me out another way, leaving a like and sharing this video would just be so helpful, so thank you. Looking at today's Scryfall card of the day, we have Delirium Skeins. There came a rush, a sudden fire in the mind. Then the 2 saw only the sooty fog of madness, heard only the crackling of their last thoughts burning away. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.